So today we have Lindsey Pever presenting to us about solar energy. My name is Christine. I'm from the College of Public Health doing my MPH in epidemiology. If everyone's comfortable, feel free to turn on your cameras. We want our speakers, we want Lindsey to feel as comfortable as possible and feel as though they're presenting to a live audience. Also, as a reminder, this is an interprofessional event with students from various disciplines and not just the College of Medicine. So we'll go ahead and get started, Lindsey. Lindsey Pever, she is an attorney for Renew Energy, where she represents a diverse array of clients in navigating legal, regulatory, and public policy issues. With a focus on renewable energy and utilities, much of her practice takes place before the Corporation Commission. Lindsey is a founding member and currently serves as president of the Oklahoma Solar Association, where she and a team of advocates work to advance solar energy in Oklahoma. She also has experience in land use and zoning issues, family law, and guardianships. So we'll give a round of applause to Lindsey and go ahead and get started when you're ready.
Thank you so much, Christine. It's so great to be with you all this morning and share some solar knowledge that hopefully will empower you. My presentation is a little bit like the Oklahoma weather. If you don't like it, stay a while and it'll change. What's funny is that I grew up in Michigan and we say that there too. So the founders of Oklahoma Solar Association recognized that Oklahoma's deployment of solar was nowhere near its potential. And so we formed OSA to provide education and support to help grow the industry. Let's see. So we're going to start with some solar fun facts. These next two slides are courtesy of Dr. Saparov. He's a professor at OU studying solid state materials for energy applications. There's some really incredible research going on at OU with he and lots of other scientists. I've used these slides for several years now with his permission. I just think they really put it into terms that are easy to understand, the sheer magnitude of the sun's resource. So the surface of the earth receives 120,000 terawatts of solar radiation per year, which is 10 to 20,000 times more power than we need to supply the entire world. So this is a 2009 estimate of finite and renewable energy reserves in terawatt years. So on the right, finite resources, this is the sum total of all that remains on the planet that we know of for natural gas, petroleum, uranium, and coal. On the left is the per year, so every year renews. And this is potential. So obviously the large yellow sphere is the sun. So just think about that. On the left, if we use these resources every year and there's that much of them, we won't run out. We'll have that again next year. And then on the right, once those are used, those are gone. So this map illustrates our solar irradiance. So you'll see like the deeper red areas are, the strongest solar resource, and then it goes all the way up into light yellow. Look at New Jersey, it looks pretty light yellow, but they actually have a booming solar industry, as do a lot of East Coast states. So the best potential, of course, is in the darker red areas, but there's solar development all over the country, even in Maine, as far north as that. So this figure is 2006, but it doesn't really change much. But that's when the Nebraska Energy Office took data from the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, usually referred to as NREL. And they kind of plotted out the potential for solar for all of the states. So Oklahoma is tied for sixth, tied with Texas for sixth. So we're sixth from the bottom. And that's our potential if we deploy our resources. So we're currently 46th or 48th in deployment of solar, depending on the source you look at. So this is the latest data from the Solar Energy Industries Association, or SEIA. And I'll just go through some fun facts since this is pretty tiny. So more than 230,000 people are currently employed in the solar industry. The market is currently valued at about $254 billion. What else is on here? So today, 4% of our electricity comes from solar, which is pretty tiny, but it's 80 times more than it was a decade ago. There are over 10,000 businesses related to solar in the US, and carbon emissions have been reduced by over 127 million metric tons annually, which is similar to 28 million vehicles off the road, 14 billion gallons of gasoline not used, 1.8 billion trees planted, and the shuttering of 32 coal-fired plants. So let's see what else is on here that's exciting. So solar makes up more than half of all the new generating capacity. So as you know, utilities deploy new generating capacity, solar is more than half of it. 13% of US homes are expected to have solar systems by 2030. And in the year 2020, which is the most recent data, a new solar project was installed every 75 seconds. Additionally, I think it's really exciting. There are just a few companies that are using solar to fulfill their corporate energy needs. Apple, Amazon, Walmart, Target, Google, Kaiser Permanente are just a few. So Oklahoma is an energy state. We always have been. We've got abundant oil, natural gas, wind, solar, and we're currently working on developing hydrogen. And while it's a very exciting time in Oklahoma's energy story, I think it's important to talk about the past and to recognize the past. So oil was first discovered in Oklahoma in 1859 by a salt miner. Prior to statehood, Oklahoma was producing more oil than any other US state or territory. For many years, the state had no regulations or conservation. As you can see, behind all of these rigs is the Oklahoma State Capitol. So they were everywhere. Since then, there's been a whole regime developed around regulations and taxation. Eventually, the state decided they needed to tax oil and gas upon severance at the wellhead. So the idea was that hydrocarbons could never be recaptured. That's why they called it a severance tax. It's commonly referred to as a gross production tax. So the tax structure, though, if you've been around Oklahoma for any time, you've heard gross production tax, there's a lot of controversy. It's really deemed to be problematic by many because an average long well is depleted in about 3 years, most of it, but the tax is much lower in the first 36 months when the well is the most productive. So it kind of begs the question, if we want to ensure this resource remains long-term, why do we incentivize its faster depletion? So Oklahoma is the 4th largest producer of crude oil. This is a natural gas plant. We're the 4th largest producer of marketed natural gas in the country. Oklahoma is also a leader in wind energy. We're number 3 in net energy produced from wind. And wind in last year accounted for about 35% of our state's electricity. So the move toward renewable energy in the state and elsewhere is driven by a number of factors ranging from the economics, its cheap, reliable power, to the draw of diversifying energy sources, to concerns about fossil fuels, such as climate change and health concerns related to emissions, to energy independence and national security. There are important incidental benefits too. Coal plants use between 2 and 4 billion gallons of water per year. Natural gas plants use less, but the fracking process to extract the gas is water use intensive. All of this matters now more than ever because almost everything requires electricity, from Apple Watches to cell phones to laptops, home security systems, scooters and cars, even buses and semi-trucks now, you name it. And as my son said during the last power outage, life without power is no life, which anyone living in Oklahoma over the last year or so probably has seen a lengthy power outage, and it does make life very difficult. But with all of these technological advances and developments, especially with battery storage technology, the future might look like this. You plug your EV in when you get home at night when electricity is the cheapest. The next day, maybe even during peak time where electricity is the most expensive is between 2 and 7 p.m. So maybe even during peak time, you'll sell the extra charge you don't need from your car to someone else. They're getting that high tech with what to do with power and batteries. It's fascinating. So we'll have all of these devices and vehicles that will contain power that a person literally could sell to another person. So anytime we talk about electricity at all, I think it's really important to do a quick and dirty electricity markets 101. So this is a map of the Southwest Power Pool, and it's commonly called the SPP. It's a regional transmission organization, or RTO. So they oversee the transmission market. It's regulated by FERC. It's sort of been analogized to being the air traffic control over the electricity market. So think about the red area. There's 14 states. Think of it as like an electron bathtub. So all of our electricity from all these states sort of feeds into the Southwest Power Pool. And then what they have, they monitor and coordinate the grid so that they can ensure that demand is being met, and they oversee all of the wholesale power. So putting it a little bit more simply, the SPP manages the energy market or the grid for our region with something they call the day ahead market. So in 15-minute increments, their goal is to deploy electricity from the least expensive resource connected to the grid at that time. So they don't care if it's coal, wind. All they care about is that it's going to be reliable and that it's the cheapest in that 15-minute increment. So the next, and I'm sure there are always questions about that. Happy to answer those. But so the next couple of slides, I'll show you what it's called the integrated marketplace, and it's kind of a 15-minute snapshot of what the mix of resources looks like. So I took this one last night, and it was really windy, so I figured wind would be high. So wind is in that sort of teal green at 61%. And then the second largest is coal in that lighter blue. So the thing about the different generation types is that solar and wind have fixed costs throughout the life of the facility. So the largest component of wholesale electricity costs are energy costs or fuel costs. So if you look at the SPP's costs, fuel costs are the highest. So if you see an increase in, say, natural gas because of like the winter storm, then our prices for electricity will go up along with that. So why don't we just go to all renewables? Well, renewables are intermittent resources, right? So the wind isn't always blowing, the sun isn't always shining. So you have to have some sort of backup, natural gas, nuclear, or coal. And coal continues people are divesting of their coal, like they say by 2030. I don't know if I believe it, but by 2030, we might get rid of all coal. So we'll see. So this again was last night. I don't remember if you can think of what it was like last night. I think it was 65, at 10 o'clock, it was windy. Well, this is this morning. So I grabbed one for this morning because I assumed coal would be really high because it was cold. So it was 16 degrees with the wind chill when I got up. And surprisingly, wind was, or kind of unsurprisingly, wind was at 20% and coal was the highest, 42%. Natural gas is in yellow at 29%. So if the wind isn't blowing, the wind had sort of calmed down, then you see, but it's cold out. Usually coal is strong in that, in those conditions. Also in the summer, lots of coal use in the summer if the wind isn't blowing because we're all running our AC, at full capacity. So let's briefly talk about energy consumption. So this illustrates the average electricity consumption per year for a typical resident of Ethiopia, Tanzania, Liberia. And if you keep following it to the right, so 52 kilowatt hours a year, you go all the way to the right, your fridge, the typical American refrigerator, uses 9 times as much energy as the average Ethiopian in a year. So that's a good time to talk about the impacts of climate on our health. So bear with me on this slide. It comes from Switch Energy Alliance, which is a nonprofit dedicated to making energy education accessible. I disabled the activation, so just kind of bear with me, but basically this plots developing countries and their average daily income against how readily available electricity is for them. So you'll see the blue is for African countries, yellow is for Asian, or gray, sorry, and then Latin America is in red. And so, I mean, can we say that electricity or a lack thereof corresponds to a country's poverty level? Well, there's at least a relationship between the two, because how can you build or even sustain an economy without reliable power? So before we jump back into some more international data and information, I added this slide about Bokoshi in southeastern Oklahoma. It's home to a fly ash pit. Fly ash is left over after coal is burned. The incidence of cancer in Bokoshi is staggering when you compare it to the population figures of this very rural town. There's an Oklahoma news report segment that is pretty eye-opening. Company representatives for the coal plant down there, and even authorities, have long said there's no harm in the practice of hauling fly ash in an open pickup trucks. However, after the story broke and some initial reporting started, the fly ash that is from this area is now carried in sealed semi-trailers that are sprayed with water upon exiting the coal plant and sprayed again after they leave the pit. So, and as I think about energy practices in development in, internationally in developing countries, I just think this is an important point to make right here at home. This is Bokoshi, Oklahoma. Do you think this could be happening in Oklahoma City or Tulsa? I really don't. So that's something to always keep track of while we develop electric resources, is to be sure that we're taking care of the populations that live amongst them. So this is Colombia. There are mud huts, thatched roofs, zero electricity. It's kind of a paradox. Energy won't end poverty, but you can't end poverty without some energy. So electricity, or a lack thereof, corresponds to a country's poverty. So here's the same village with distributed solar. So what I love so much about distributed energy is that, especially in developing countries, it's independent of the grid infrastructure. It helps people in the village, like this one, live more independently, extend their workday, accomplish more of their goals. And they don't have to rely on what might be a corrupt government for power. This is all their own. So this is Nepal. A lot of mud huts, thatched roofs. Women often have 5 to 10 children, and they cook indoors with wood, coal, or dung. The thing about that is it's akin to smoking 2 to 3 packs of cigarettes every day for everyone in the house. Many are plagued with respiratory diseases, lung cancer, cataracts, and premature death. The implementation of propane or biogas, or distributed generation with solar panels like the former slide, is immediately better air quality and better health outcomes. So this image is from a Wall Street Journal article. Starting by age 8 or so, almost every girl in this Ethiopian village spends most of the day walking between a nearby forest and her home, carrying firewood on her back that will be used for cooking. It's not uncommon to see 4 generations of women from the same family, the youngest and oldest both stooped under the weight of the wood. So the story was about how Ethiopia is building one of the largest dams in the world to power their new centralized grid. It's 3 times the size of the Hoover Dam, and it's going to power about half of Ethiopia's 100 million people. But a project like this comes with geopolitical issues, just like you would expect, including an ongoing controversy with Egypt. So can impoverished nations afford to invest in the environment? Well, the easy answer is no. And the examples I use, most don't even have running water, indoor plumbing, reliable electricity. It might be accurate to say the last thing they're thinking about is the environmental impacts of the greenhouse gases coming from their attempts to cook food or warm their families. So who can help make this transition? Well, the US can. So you're probably wondering, what does smoking have to do with anything? So I got this slide from David Hochschild. He's from the California Energy Commission. And he asserted that how our country has handled smoking cessation is similar to how we will handle renewables, only in the reverse, I suppose. So this comparison just really struck with me, because my dad would tell me when he was young, the doctor was smoking, the nurse was smoking, all the moms in the waiting room were smoking. And as you see here, all of their heroes were also smoking. And when people began to hear that smoking was harmful, not many people reacted. It took a long time. So it took years, regulations that continued to change, health warnings followed by banned TV ads, and then cigarette taxes, in some places doubled or even worse. The point is, the science that we are harming the environment is out there, but it's going to take some time for people to truly heed the warning. So let's talk about something hopeful. 7,300 schools in our country are powered by solar energy. Solar energy provides schools a fixed price for their very significant electricity needs. Those are usually second in their cost after teacher pay. And so it's a sound financial investment. And then the cost of technology has gone down so much that it's something, 7,300 schools and more every single week. So the other awesome thing about solar on schools is that they can tie it with student instruction and develop innovative curricula and naturally spark students' awareness of environmental concerns. So Oklahoma could really be a leader as far as this movement, because we've got significantly financially burdened schools, And a lot of our schools have the flat roof, which is just perfect for solar panels. There's about 180 school buildings in Oklahoma City and Tulsa alone that have those traditional flat roofs. Projects like these can also address the state shortage of STEM and STEAM educated people in the workforce. So despite all these hurdles, there's so much room for optimism. This is just so fun. I love this. Okay, so I've got one more. This last image comes from Generation 180, which is another great nonprofit doing interesting and engaging work to help educate us to take action on clean energy. It's such a great illustration of how we can make a difference. And when I say we, I mean anyone and everyone with a desire. You begin by educating yourself, identifying an issue that fuels your passion, and then knowing about who is making these decisions for us. Because if we don't communicate with them, they'll never know what is important to us. So I'll go ahead and leave this slide up. These are all excellent resources if you want to get involved or learn more, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you so much, Lindsay. That was great. Audience, if you guys are comfortable with unmuting yourselves, feel free to ask questions through microphone, or if you want to type them in chat, that's okay too, and then I can read them aloud.
Is there anything you didn't learn that you'd hope to learn?
I can go ahead and start with a question. So Lindsay, are there any myths regarding solar energy that some people have a misunderstanding of, or anything that can be basically debunked?
Absolutely. The first probably 2 years that after we founded Oklahoma Solar Association, we would get calls from, journalists, and almost every time I was asked, well, isn't it illegal to have solar panels in Oklahoma? And it's been tough at the legislature, because you have to think, if people are providing their own power, someone's missing out on money. Well, it's utilities. And utilities have done the same thing for so long. We pay our electric bill. We don't know anything about it unless we're electrical engineers. We don't ask questions. And that's just not how it is anymore. People are informed. They want to take matters into their own hands. And the thing about solar energy is that it is finally a resource that we all can have. There's tons of nonprofits doing low income solar. And then if, the rest of it, you could argue, is for people with means, which there's a lot of great people working to sort of, fill that gap. But even in Oklahoma, even though we have very cheap electricity rates compared to other states, right now, solar panels make sense. You can get a loan that pays off, in 15 to 20 years. The solar panels should last 20 to 25 years. And most of the loan payments are less than what you're already paying on your electric bill. So I would say the biggest misconception is that it's too expensive, it's too complicated, or that it's not even allowed, that the utility won't allow it.
Very interesting. Thank you. So I have a question from Reagan in the chat. She says, what options would you recommend for residential solar in Oklahoma that is the most budget-friendly option?
So not every house can have solar panels. The best thing to do is to call at least 2 companies. I would probably say 3, and have them come out, and they'll look at your roof, they'll look at your electric bill, and they'll give you a quote. The financing that I was describing, because that's the way most people do it, is very low interest. A lot of times it's a home equity loan, so that believe it or not, the solar company that is trying to sell you the solar panels are a wonderful resource to give you the information you need. But again, get 2 or 3 quotes because you'll be surprised how different they are.
So if you're like in the process of building a home, let's say, is there a way you can get someone like to help you in like a consultation or something as you're building your home to kind of have a better roof for solar energy?
Yeah, absolutely. You would probably have to connect the solar installer with your developer or your builder. But the beauty of solar panels is that they can be installed on just about any surface. And so especially a brand new roof is going to be just great. So what I mean by not every roof can have solar, not every home can have solar. You want solar panels to face south or west. And so if, depending on the pitch of your roof and, you know, where, like for instance, my house faces south, but I live in a historic district, so I could never have solar panels until we changed historic preservation, you know, because you can't have it on the front of the house. So that's just one example. Some roofs, just maybe the small part of the roof is facing south or west, and so that won't work out. But on a new roof, yeah, this more than likely you'll be able to work with them to figure that out.
Very neat. Thank you so much.
Of course.
I see a question from Esther in the chat. She says, since we are trying to get more involved in using solar energy, and we mostly talk about all the great benefits, is it to say there are no disadvantages of this type of energy production? If yes, what are they?
Yeah, so definitely no energy source is perfect. And you know, there's downside. The downsides I would say to solar panels are that it is expensive. It's a long-term commitment. So if you're renting your house, you know, you're more than likely, unless you just have a landlord who's interested in it, you won't be able to participate. There are rare earth minerals that have to be mined in order to build solar panels. But when you look at constructing the solar panels, how long they last, and you compare it to just about any other of those resources that we're relying on for electricity now, it's still, you know, much better. There's no fuel cost. They're really durable. And a good way to look at it is like in Oklahoma, we have a lot of hail, we have strong winds. Kind of a rule of thumb is like, yes, hail can damage solar panels, but it's typically the kind of hail that would break your car window, which, you know, that's happened to me once, and I've lived in Oklahoma for 25 years. One time my car windows were broken. So those are pretty good odds. But yeah, I mean, no resource is perfect. It's just about what is the best resource. And a lot of it is the technology, you know, improves and the costs come down. Same thing with battery storage. So the one thing about if you're in Oklahoma and have solar panels, you're going to have to be interconnected to the grid. You don't just get to have your own power and be off the grid unless you have a battery backup. And even so, a lot of people are concerned to just totally go off the grid. But battery storage is another, you know, another thing about rare earth minerals that have to be mined in order to create those. But again, it's about choosing the best, what's best for the environment, and what's best for our health. So.
Great, thank you. As a reminder, we do have 5 minutes left for this breakout room. So if anyone has any final questions, now would be a good time to ask.
And my email was on the first slide. if people would rather email me, I'm totally happy to take your emails if you'd rather not ask the question to the group. Let me get there. There we go. Yeah, so if you want to take my email and if you have any questions, Oklahoma Solar Association takes calls all the time about which solar installer should I use or who's reputable, things like that. So that's why we're here. We're here to help. So don't hesitate to reach out.
All right, I see a question from Lauren in the chat. She says, it seems like there is such a big discrepancy between Oklahoma's renewable energy usage versus potential. Do you know if there are any initiatives or proposed policies in place to close this gap?
It's such a great question. The easy answer is yes, there are. You know, anything you do that helps people deploy their own solar is going to be met with resistance by the utilities. And so it's always going to, you know, we're going to have to negotiate that. Right now, we have made very incremental steps. It used to be if you had solar panels, you could power your own, you know, while the sun was shining, you could power your home. But as soon as the sun was not shining, or any excess power, like let's say in the summer, you're going to produce way more than you need. All of that went back to the utility for free. You just gave it back to them. But now, as of 2017 or 18, we helped change the rules that surround that. So now you at least get to sell your energy back to the utility just at a cheaper rate than what you're buying if you just bought it from them. So again, incremental steps, but it's important for people to reach out to their legislators, because if they're only hearing from their friends at the utilities, then they don't think Oklahomans think of solar as, you know, a goal or as something that's important to them. So I really encourage people to reach out to their elected officials and have these discussions.
Great, and I see one final question we'll take for this session. So from Mallory, she asks, as far as price for panels go, how soon do you foresee the production becoming cheap enough for solar panels to be commonplace?
So I would say it's there now. You literally can set up your system and the financing so that it doesn't cost you more than your electric utility bill. That's their goal. Is they look at your bill and they try to set up the financing so that you're not paying more than that bill. And then you pay it off in say 15 years, and then you have 10 years with your more years with your solar panels where you'll have a very small bill. So that's happening now. It's just that not everyone can go get, you know, financing. And so, but literally every year they get cheaper and the financing makes more sense.
Awesome. All right. Thank you everyone so much. Thank you, Lindsey, again. This breakout room is going to be closing in just 1 minute. So if everyone wants to go ahead and leave the breakout room, we'll see you all in the main session.